Москва, срочно! Подтвердите координаты. Они идут прямо к нам.
Повторяю, цель на вашем курсе. Примите меры немедленно.
Я вижу их, прием.
Слишком поздно.
Ракета запущен. Подтвердите координаты.
Подтверждаю, курс на цель!
Всем на станции, готовность.
Red alert! Impact imminent! This is not a drill! DEFCON 1, launch authorization granted. God help us all!
In the autumn of 1983, the world was holding its breath. The Cold War was at its most frigid, a delicate, terrifying balance of power between the United States and the Soviet Union. Both superpowers had stockpiled enough nuclear weapons to obliterate civilization, not just once, but many times over. Their only defense was a series of early warning systems, designed to detect incoming missiles in a matter of seconds. The strategy was simple and brutal: mutually assured destruction. If one side launched, the other would retaliate immediately, guaranteeing that any nuclear war would be the last. It was a doctrine meant to make war unthinkable, but it also created a tripwire for global catastrophe. A single glitch, a single false alarm, could be all it took to end the world. Deep inside a secret military base south of Moscow, known as SRPK-HOV-15, a small team of officers sat in the quiet glow of computer screens. Their job was to monitor a new satellite system, the last line of defense against a surprise American attack. On duty that night was Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, a military engineer. His task seemed straightforward, but the responsibility was immense. If the system detected a nuclear launch from the U.S., he was to immediately alert Soviet High Command. From there, the message would race to the Kremlin, and within minutes, the decision to launch a retaliatory strike would be made. The timing couldn't have been worse. Tensions were already at a breaking point. Just a few weeks earlier, Soviet fighter jets had shot down a civilian airliner, Korean Airlines Flight 007, after it strayed into their airspace. The incident killed all 269 people on board and sparked global fury. At the same time, NATO was gearing up for Able Archer 83, a massive military exercise simulating a full-scale nuclear conflict. Soviet intelligence was on high alert, deeply paranoid that this exercise might be a cover for a real first strike. In this atmosphere of suspicion and fear, even the smallest misunderstanding could have devastating consequences. Just after midnight on September 26, 1983, the silence in the command bunker was shattered. A piercing alarm blared through the room. On one of the main displays, a single, terrifying word flashed in stark red letters: launch. The system was reporting that a nuclear missile had been fired from an American base. Officers stared at each other, their faces pale in the flashing red light. Before they could even process the first alert, another appeared, then a third, and a fourth, and a fifth. The computer now insisted that 5 American intercontinental ballistic missiles were hurtling toward the Soviet Union. The protocol was crystal clear. Petrov was trained for this exact scenario. He was supposed to accept the system's warning as fact and immediately pass it up the chain of command. Soviet leaders would then have just a few precious minutes to launch their own missiles before the incoming warheads hit. This procedure had been drilled into them for years. The system was designed to be infallible. After all, machines don't feel fear. They don't hesitate. They simply report the facts. But as the alarms continued to scream, something felt wrong to Petrov. He stared at the data, his mind racing. The system claimed only 5 missiles were inbound. 5. That didn't make sense. If the United States was truly starting a nuclear war, a war that would decide the fate of humanity, they wouldn't launch just 5 missiles. They would launch hundreds, maybe thousands, in an overwhelming first strike designed to cripple the Soviet Union's ability to retaliate. A 5-missile attack was strategically illogical. It was almost tentative. Petrov also knew that this satellite system was new, rushed into service. Its engineers had admitted it wasn't perfect, that it might still have bugs. The men in the room looked to him, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and anticipation. They knew the rules. Every second that ticked by was a second closer to potential annihilation. If the attack was real, they were losing valuable time. But if it was a mistake, and Petrov reported it as a real attack, The Soviet leadership might unleash thousands of nuclear warheads on American cities based on a ghost signal. The decision resting on his shoulders wasn't just a military one, it was existential. The fate of the world hung on his judgment. The minutes stretched into an eternity. The alarms kept blaring. The computer screen continued to display its horrifying message: missiles inbound. Petrov would later describe it as a battle raging inside his own head, a conflict between cold, hard protocol and his own human intuition. Trust the machine, and the world might end in a blaze of nuclear fire. Doubt the machine, and risk leaving his country defenseless against a genuine attack. In the end, he made his choice. He picked up the phone to his superiors, took a deep breath, and reported the incident as a system malfunction, a false alarm. It was an incredible gamble, a direct contradiction of his orders. If he was wrong, he would go down in history as the man who failed to warn his country of its own destruction. But if he was right, he would have just saved the world from an unimaginable mistake. The next few minutes were the most agonizing of his life. Everyone in the bunker waited in absolute silence. If the missiles were real, ground-based radar systems would soon pick them up as they crossed the horizon. They watched the radar screens, expecting to see the telltale blips of incoming warheads. But the screens remained empty, black. No missiles appeared. No nuclear detonations lit up the sky. The attack that the satellite system had reported with such terrifying certainty simply wasn't there. A later investigation revealed the bizarre cause of the false alarm. The satellite's sensors had mistaken the reflection of sunlight off high-altitude clouds for the heat signatures of rocket engines. The system's algorithm, designed to interpret heat patterns, saw the reflections and concluded, with perfect logic, that missiles were being launched from American bases. The technology built to prevent a nuclear war had come terrifyingly close to starting one. The incident was immediately classified, buried deep within the secret archives of the Soviet military. Stanislav Petrov was not hailed as a hero. In fact, he was quietly reprimanded by his superiors for not following protocol. From their rigid, military point of view, he had taken an unacceptable risk. He was eventually reassigned and took an early retirement. He faded back into obscurity, his moment of incredible pressure and profound judgment known only to a handful of people. It wasn't until the 1990s, after the Cold War had thawed, that the story finally came to light. The world was stunned. Historians and security experts realized just how close we had come to the brink. If a different officer had been on duty that night, one who trusted the system without question, the alert would have been passed up the chain as a confirmed American attack. Given the paranoia and tension of 1983, it's almost certain that the Kremlin would have ordered a full-scale retaliatory launch. A nuclear holocaust, triggered by sunlight on a cloud. The story transformed Stanislav Petrov into an unlikely global icon, a symbol of human reason, triumphing over flawed technology. He wasn't a general or a politician. He was just an ordinary officer who, in a moment of unimaginable crisis, chose to trust his gut instead of the machine in front of him. His quiet act of defiance, his decision to question the data, may have been the single most important thing that prevented World War III. The Cold War is over, but the story of that night remains a chilling cautionary tale. It shows how modern warfare is fought not just with weapons, but with information, and how easily that information can be misinterpreted. The complex, automated systems we build to keep us safe can sometimes create brand new, unforeseen dangers. For the rest of his life, Petrov lived quietly, mostly unknown to his neighbors. The man who held the world's fate in his hands for a few terrifying minutes returned to a normal life. But his story serves as a profound reminder that history doesn't always turn on grand battles or famous speeches. Sometimes, it pivots on a single, quiet decision, made far from the public eye, in an underground bunker, by an individual who has to choose between following orders and following their conscience. On that September night, as alarms screamed for war, one man chose peace. And because of that, we are all still here to tell his story. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as incredible as we did, please like this video and subscribe for more.